Hello, welcome to another episode of Finer Things with your host Michael H. Gilligan. We are joined today by my dog Rufus, a purebred British White Terrier. There you are, Rufus. Today, we are reading The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. Today we begin our story with the main character analysis. Christopher is the main character, and he is 15. In this book, he has to overcome many challenges, one of which is his autism. It is never mentioned in the book that he has autism, but is implied with his computer-like math skills, his inability to read and emphasize with other people, and difficulty understanding metaphors. This comes into play with his dad quite often, and is a big reason the story ends up the way it does. However, with autism, Christopher is great with math and science, and is extremely analytical and has a super memory. But he has to avoid social interaction, and he also hates talking with others. He also has few friends and does not trust anyone. Finally, throughout the story, he gains independence and confidence, especially after his lonely travel to London. We will use a few quotes to help show his character traits. So quote 1, "I think I would make a very good astronaut. To be a good astronaut, you have to be intelligent, and I'm intelligent. You have to be able to understand how machines work, and I'm good at understanding how machines work. You also have to be someone who would like being on their own in a tiny spacecraft thousands of miles away." And here's another one. "People think they're not computers because they have feelings. But feelings are just having a picture on a screen in your head of what is going to happen tomorrow, or next year, or what might have happened instead of what did happen. And if it is a happy picture, they smile." Now we will analyze the mentors of the story. He has one big mentor, and her name is Sabohan. Sabohan is a mentor in the story, being Christopher's main teacher and sometimes his psychologist. She works as a teacher to improve his mind socially and academically. She observes and helps with his autism. As well of all of this, she is the one of the only people that Christopher trusts. She provides human connection, assigns him his detective journal, which is what got him into all his trouble, reads it, and deciphers it for the reader. She's extremely understanding, nice, and can identify with Christopher. A quote that helped describe her traits was, "Are you telling the truth, Christopher?" And then I said, "I always tell the truth." And she said, "I know you do, Christopher, but sometimes we get sad about things. We don't like to tell other people that we are sad about them." At this point, we'd like to analyze the mentors of the story. He has many mentors in his life, but he has one main one in through his eyes. It is his father. Most of the time, his father is calm and does not use his temper, especially with Christopher. But that anger is shown when he kills Mrs. Shear's dog after getting angry at her and loses Christopher's trust. He is also bitter and loses his temper when he tries to start a new life with Mrs. Shears, but is shot down. He does support Christopher's A-level maths, how Christopher eats, and most of Christopher's life. He is a normal person, but does his best to help Christopher. However, despite being a mostly normal person, in our view, he screws up by revealing that he killed Mrs. Shear's dog. Oh, Rufus, you don't like that, do you? And he hid letters from his mother because he did not know how to convey that his mother left the family, and made Christopher extremely scared of him. Technically, Mrs. Shears and Mr. Shears are also the devils, as well as the mother, and they play a role in making Christopher's life spin out of control. But Christopher associates all the blame onto his father. His father screws up once and ruins the relationship with his son. Here is an excerpt from the book. "Father said, 'Christopher, do you understand that I love you?' And I said yes, because loving someone is helping them when they get into trouble, looking after them, telling them the truth, and Father looks after me when I get into trouble. like coming to the police station, and he looks after me by cooking meals for me, and he always tells the truth, which means that he loves me. This is an obvious foreshadow to the events that occur next. And here's another excerpt. Mother had not had a heart attack. Mother had not died. Mother had been alive all the time, and Father had lied about this. I tried really hard to think if there was any other explanation, but I couldn't think of one. And then I couldn't think of anything at all because my brain wasn't working properly. I felt giddy. It was like the room was swinging from side to side, as it was at the top of a really tall building, and the building was swinging backwards and forward in a strong wind. This is a simile too. But I knew that the room couldn't be swinging backwards and forwards, so it must have been something which was happening inside my head. I rolled onto the bed and curled up into a ball. My stomach hurt. Don't worry, listeners. Just like the fire, the story is coming to an end. We are at the climax. Christopher encounters a challenging journey. Now Christopher is scared because his father is choosing him to be next on his killing spree in his mind. So he begins a journey to go to his mother, all the way in London. He hides from his dad until dawn, and then he grabs his red Toby, food rations, some money, and he kisses the house goodbye because he is never coming back. He encounters his first challenge. Social encounters. Now, there's a ton of people down in the train station. So, to distract himself from that, he does math problems in his head. Along the way, he meets a policeman, who he feels safe with, so he asks for help to get onto the train. The policeman successfully gets him onto the train, but feels suspicious about him, so he gets on the train and tries to get Christopher back off. He does this by touching him. That was not a good idea. Now, the train starts, and the policeman gives up and sits with Christopher, saying that as soon as the train stops again, he's off. So Christopher goes to the bathroom, and he hides. The policeman, nervous that Christopher ran away, gets off and leaves Christopher behind. And then Christopher encounters another challenge. He has to figure out how to use the underground. As soon as he gets there, he watches other people and notices how they put the money in and how they get their ticket. And he does that and gets onto the underground. Another challenge. He almost gets hit by a train. His rat Toby jumps into the train tracks, and he jumps in to get him, with a train coming a few seconds after he's pulled out by another man. He finally makes it to his mom's house, but only to encounter more problems. Having Christopher there creates a divot between Mr. Shears and his mother. And his mother, out of the love of Christopher, leaves Mr. Shears and goes back to his original town. Christopher has just defeated the climax, and the rest is falling action. This is the climax because he runs away from his problems to only encounter more, but after this, the story begins to wrap up. Finally, listeners, the last segment. The theme. There are many themes in this story, but fear is the most prominent. When looking through Christopher's eyes, he always sees the worst in people, especially when he doesn't understand them. And if they screw up once, they are always branded by that in his mind. Fear from unpredictability, fear from being around people, fear from being touched. These are all things that Christopher is afraid of, and they all come into play in the book. During the climax, he is forced to brave the challenges of the outside world. He's afraid because he cannot control what's out there, and he's controlled his whole life. And he can predict every turn of his life. But when he's thrust into an unpredictable situation that he can't control for maybe one of the first times in his controlled life, he's afraid. 2 quotes to help you understand that are, I do not like people shouting at me. It makes me scared that they are going to hit me or touch me. I do not know what's going to happen. And then I realized there's nothing I can do, which felt safe. Finally, because you guys have been just perfect, a bonus quote. I do not like strangers, because I do not like people I've never met before. They are hard to understand. Thank you for listening to another episode of Finer Things. This has been your host, and my pleasure, Michael H. Gilligan.